Hey, rookies, we're coming to the end of the season with 3 weeks left until the playoffs begin. I went 2-1 on free picks, but unfortunately 5-9 overall as many teams again went over the total as I took the unders. Jeff, how was your week 14?
It was really weird. It is the second week in a row that I had the exact same stats. 1 and 2 on free picks and 6 and 6 overall, 2 weeks in a row.
Okay, my key takeaways from week 14 is that the contenders won when they needed, even with backups, and the pretenders did not finish the games. So I've classified the contenders are the 49ers, Eagles, Chiefs, Ravens, Bengals, and Bills, along with the Cowboys, obviously, and the pretenders look like the Seahawks, Vikings, Titans, Giants, Bucks, and Dolphins. With a couple teams on the bubble as I'm watching, being the Panthers maybe getting in and beating the Bucks for that division South. The Pats and the Lions are in that. We got to know where they are, and we'll find out more this week as they play pretty critical games that could, basically determine the outcome for the season. Jeff, what were your key takeaways for week 14?
Well, a couple. I think there's a clear 2-team tier with Kansas City and Buffalo before you drop to Philadelphia. But then I'm also seeing Cincinnati climb back up into that. I'm going to put them in that same tier with Philadelphia now. And they've really been playing much better, especially the offensive line has been doing better. So I like them as a second tier team. And then the next tier, I don't know, I put Dallas in there. I put, a few of these people that we aren't so sure about, and in San Francisco, depending on when Debo gets back.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of injuries coming to the forefront. And it's interesting that you put the Bills and the Chiefs up above the Eagles despite the record. What's your thoughts on that one?
Mostly been the strength of wins and quarterback play. I think when I see a good defense come against Philadelphia, and I think Dallas will be able to do better this next time around, I see them being able to control them. They've struggled last 3 or 4 weeks when they've faced better teams. They killed the lesser teams, and I think New York Giants are. But I see Kansas City and Buffalo being much more complete with still better quarterback play, which I think will be super important in the playoffs.
Yeah, well, it's going to come down to quarterback play for sure. Hey, rookies, no bye teams this week and for the rest of the season. 6 bye teams are coming back from the bye week. The Falcons, Bears, Packers, Colts, Saints, Commanders. The Colts travel to Minnesota while the Bears host the soaring Eagles as the worst post bye draws. Meanwhile, the Panthers host the Steelers at home along with the Packers and the Rams. And the Packers are getting an extra day there, but the Rams are coming off a Thursday night game. And the Commanders and the Giants, so they're pretty much canceling the Commanders have the advantage there. The Saints and the Falcons are facing off, negating the bye advantage. I note the Packers, like the Pats, got an extra day off, a day of rest, playing on Monday and hosting. I note the Pats pretty much handled the Cards on the road after the bye week and the extra day. So I think I think that's going to really put an advantage for the Packers there. Any thoughts on the bye weeks, Jeff?
I haven't seen enough injured players coming off of the injured list off the bye week, so I don't know how much it's going to help. And you get the rest and the extra prep, but without actually healing any of these injured players, I'm not sure which team is going to have the real big advantage.
Yeah, and you got to wonder if they're going to bring them back for week 16, 15, and 16 if they're in the hunt, or if they're going to let them go until the playoffs, unless they need them, like they're in the hunt for a playoff, like the Commanders and Giants. I would imagine those players go, but maybe if you got a guy coming back for the Bills, the Eagles, they hold him out until maybe week 17 or something. Hey, next up, we start with just a note. We start week 15 with 3 Saturday games, so keep that in mind, both for any bets you're going to make and for any fantasy that you're putting up. First up on Saturday, the Vikings host the Colts. and are favored by 4 with the over-under set at 48 and a hook. Colts are coming off a bye week, and before that, they were blown out by the Cowboys with the defense giving up 54 points. The Vikings are also coming off a loss on the road to Detroit. The offense was limited on the ground last week, but put up over 400 in the air. The Vikings should be able to run more efficiently this week as the Colts are in the bottom third of the rush defense. I also think the players' injuries to the secondary that the Vikings, the injuries to the Colts secondary, the Vikings should be able to continue to win the battle of the air raid there with the Colts. Of note, the Vikings did put up tackle Blake Brand on injured reserve. That could be an effect on this week's game and as we go in the playoffs. Jeff, who do you like here?
Well, this is a very good example of how my analysis is getting closer to Vegas's point spreads. I have this one at exactly a 4-point Minnesota spread, which is exactly what I see right now on Bet Online. So it looks like I'm right in line with Vegas. The one thing that does lead me towards Minnesota here is that they have performed better against the spread over the last 4 or 5 weeks than Indy. So if I have to bet, I probably go Minnesota, but this one is just dead on with what I would predict. So I might stay away from it.
Yeah, I kind of like the Colts here to cover with the 4 points. I think it's going to come down to a field goal. And, the Vikings losing that tackle, I think it's going to be a bigger deal. So we'll have to see. But it's not my free pick, just kind of where I'm leaning with one of my picks. Hey, next up, the Browns host the Ravens and are home favorites by 2.5, despite the Ravens being the division lead, with the over-under set at a very low 37. Of course, division games have pretty much gone 60% under, so keep that in mind. The Ravens won last week at Pittsburgh, and their defense stepped up with Jackson out last week. The offense played okay, enough to get done. Meanwhile, the Browns lost to the surging Bengals, and Watson looked okay, but the Browns couldn't run the ball at the Bengals, only rushing for about 71 yards, a season low. The issue for the Ravens this week is that quarterback is Huntley was in concussion protocol, and we don't know where Jackson is in his recovery. And I would not think they're going to bring him back too quickly. I like the Ravens to step up again and keep up with the Browns and cover. But what I like here most is the over. I think 37 seems too low even for a division game. So for my first free pick, take the 37 over 37 Browns versus Ravens. Jeff?
So the injury to Lamar does make it difficult. Otherwise, I would think that Baltimore would probably be a 2 to 3 point favorite. So I just have to try and figure out how much I think Lamar impacts this spread. I also think we're going to, continue to see Watson get better with Cleveland. If Amari Cooper can play, which he's saying he's going to try and give it a go, I think I'm going to lean towards Cleveland in this one, minus the 2.5, just because they've done a little better covering the spread in the last month or so.
Okay, well, I like that because I think at least the Baltimore is going to score 17. So if you think the Browns are going to beat them, then I think that's 20-23, and I think that gets over the total of 37. But shop the lines, maybe it drops before game time, which is on a Saturday. Next up, on Saturday night, we got the 10-3 Bills hosting the 8-5 Fins. The Bills are home favorites by a touchdown. The over-under is at 43. Game time temp will be 24 degrees Fahrenheit. Looks like it'll feel like 14 degrees with the wind chill. The Bills won last week at home against the Jets, while the Fins lost on the road against the Chargers in a really bad game. My thesis for the season has been the Fins have feasted on sub-500 teams with the exception of the month of September, and we are now in December. So for my second free pick, take Buffalo -7 against the Fins. If you can buy down a 0.5 point to 6.5, that might make sense. I would lean toward the under here as well. Jeff?
So this one was another very close one on my analysis because my spreadsheet would tell me Buffalo should win by 8, which is a pretty close metric. And the difference in performance against the spread was 0. They were both exactly the same. So this comes down to basically my thought that 80% of the time, the team that wins the game is going to cover the spread. And I definitely see Buffalo winning the game, playing in the cold at home. So I'm going with Buffalo minus the 7 here.
Okay, free pick for you, or just where you're headed?
Just a regular.
Okay. Yeah, so we haven't really had a very cold season, and we're going to start getting cold temperatures this weekend, and then going into the rest of the month and into the playoffs in January, with a cold snap really dropping the temperatures, and I think you're going to see those cold weather teams fare a little bit better, and I think teams like the Finns that are more hot weather teams are going to fade, but we'll have to see. But you heard it here for my second free pick. Take Buffalo minus 7 against the Finns. And we kick off Sunday, week 15, with the Cowboys on the road at Jacksonville. The Cowboys are road favorites by 4, and the over-under is 47 and a hook. The boys barely got past the Texans with a late touchdown by Zeke and a couple touchdowns, I think, by Pollard. The Jags won on the road at Tennessee in a pretty impressive game, but they could not hold down Henry, who rushed for over 120. The Jags defense is middle of the road against the run. The Cowboys come in running very efficiently. Question is, can the Jags keep up with the Dallas this week? Jeff, any value here for you?
This one's very similar to the last game in that I've got almost dead even strength of bet against the spread. And I think Jacksonville might be slightly undervalued. With Dallas, I would pick them by about 2. But then I go back to that whole thought of typically, at least 80% of the time, the team that wins covers. And I just see Dallas trying to put everything back together again after a bad performance last week and getting ready for the Eagles. Plus, I think you may see Tyron Smith in the offensive line this week, actually playing right tackle, a move from his almost entire career at left tackle. So I'm going to go Dallas in this one. It's a slight lean, but I think Dallas is going to pull this one out.
Yeah, I'm not really either side on this one. This one's a little bit puzzling to me why the Jags are even close. They did have a good game last week, but they put up some stinker games too, and the Cowboys have also put up some pretty average games, but nothing as bad as the Jags have put up. So we'll see who shows up and which defense shows up for Jacksonville. Hey, the Eagles take the league best 12-1 record on the road to face the Bears at Soldier Field. Bears are home dogs by 9. The over-under is 48.5. The Eagles have just been on a roll this season. Philly is 9-4 ATS and 9-4 over. Meanwhile, the Bears are a 4-8-1 ATS, but they are 9-4 to the over. I like Philly here, but love the over as well. The Eagles have kept teams to 19 points and putting up 30, thus the 48. And the Bears are giving up 26 a game on average. So I kind of feel like the Bears are going to give up more to Philly than their average of 30. And the Bears are going to get more points than Philadelphia. But I'm that's just kind of my thought, not a free pick. Jeff, where are you at here?
Well, when I looked at the point spread, I was expecting it to be Philly by 7. I think it might be a little inflated trying to get somebody to take Chicago, but the performance against the spread and just the fact that they have been so dominant against lesser teams, teams without a really strong defense, I think Philly's going to take care of the 9 points here. Not a free pick, but it's a fairly strong lean towards Philly.
Yep, and I'd lean toward the over. That's what I like. All right, next up, we got 2 dome teams facing off with the Saints hosting the Falcons. The Saints are favored by 4, and the over-under is 43. The Falcons look to start their rookie quarterback Ritter this week out of Cincinnati. The New Orleans defense is top 30 against the pass and right in the middle against the run. The New York defense is getting back linebackers Hanson and are fairly healthy. Meanwhile, the Falcons are coming off a bye week and a loss earlier to the Steelers. I'm staying away from this one, but I like the Saints to win Not sure they're going to cover because you don't know what Ritter's going to do, but he could throw 5 picks too against New Orleans defense. So I'm staying away, and the total feels also about right. Jeff, any value here for you?
Yeah, my total expectation was 44, and I think this one's 43.5. Last time I looked, so over under looks really good online with Vegas, so I wouldn't bet that way. With a rookie quarterback starting against New Orleans, which has a good defense in their dome, I think he's going to struggle a little bit, and I do like New Orleans to cover the 4 points in this one.
All right. I kind of agree with you on that one, Jeff. It's going to be tough for that rookie, but we've had rookies come in and just light it up. Purdy did last week against the Fins. I don't know what the score is today against the Hawks. That'll be interesting to see that game. My game of the week, we have the New York Jets hosting the Detroit Lions with playoff implications on the line for the wild card berths in both divisions. The Jets are favored by 1.5, essentially a pick'em game. The over/under is 44.5. The Jets came up short at Buffalo, and the Lions won last week. The Lions are 5-1 over the past 6, with the only loss coming against the Bills in a close one. Meanwhile, the Jets have struggled once since the bye, going 1-4, and not really playing that well on either side of the ball. But I'm kind of leaning toward the Jets here. Jeff, who do you like in this one?
I like the Jets here as well. I like the way the direction Detroit is headed. I think they are playing much better than I anticipated. So I give them a lot of credit, but I think going to the Jets, playing in cold weather in New York, it's going to be difficult for Goff. It's going to help the Jets defense, which is already tough. So I like the Jets to probably win by 4 or 5 here.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. And be honest with you, I like the under. I've said under on the Lions before and got burned, but I think those cold temps are going to sit there on the legs, and we'll see how they play. All right, next up, the Panthers host the Steelers and a shot at first place in NFC South this week, with the Bucs in a tough one against the Bengals, hosting the Bengals. Panthers are favored at home by a field goal, and the over/under is 37.5. The Panthers are getting it done with a strong run game and turnovers on defense. The Steelers took a step back against the Ravens at home. And it can be expected with a rookie quarterback. The Panthers put up quite a defense. The Panthers have quite a few defensive players on the questionable list this week, so that might be an advantage to the Steelers. And the Steelers are coming to the game banged up as well, with Harris and Freiermuth, their tight end, out at Wednesday practice, and Pickett limited. I like the over here with the defenses reeling from injuries, but I'd stay away from the spread. Jeff, what do you think?
So it is a fairly close margin on my indicators, but they both are pointing me towards Carolina. They've performed better the last month against the spread. I would think point differential, they're undervalued by a point or so. So I'm going to go Carolina minus 3 points in this one.
Okay. Free pick or just a regular pick?
No, still no free picks yet.
Okay. We got to get to them. All right. Well, maybe we get here with this one. The Texans host the Chiefs, and they're home dogs at minus 14. Over under set at 49. I'm not sure what Vegas is thinking there. The Texans lost a close one to the Cowboys last week. Meanwhile, the Chiefs got by the Broncos in KC. And the KC is 4-8-1 ATS, while the Texans are a bit better at 5-7-1. Not sure I would let last week's cover against the Cowboys make you believe it's a trend, though. I'm staying away from the game, but would expect KC to cover. And I would lean toward the under here. Jeff, what are you thinking?
So this is my first free pick of the week. I think Houston had a kind of shot their shot, had a big emotional effort against Dallas, came up just short. So that's going to be to the detriment. They also had their starting running back injure his ankle. I don't even know if he'll play, but if so, he was going for the MRI and definitely would be limited. So that's going to slow them down, and they won't be able to eat as much clock. And finally, I just think Patrick Mahomes will be able to exploit the Houston defense in ways that Dak just couldn't do last week. So for my first free pick, I do think Kansas City takes care of business and wins by at least 14.
Okay, you heard it here. First free pick for Jeff is take Kansas City minus 14. Make sure you shop the lines. You may be able to get it at 13.5 if it comes down. All right, next up, the Broncos host the Cards and are favored by 2.5. The over-under set at 36.5. Murray was placed on IR. And it looks like the Colts are going to go with Colt McCoy at quarterback. They lost a tough one on Monday to the Pats. Meanwhile, the Denver offense had its best showing of the season and lost to Kansas City with the highest point total of 28. I like the over here a lot. I think this 36.5 is pretty low. I like it to go over that, and I see the Broncos winning at home. Jeff?
I'm going to agree with you on both of those. This is my largest point differential on the over-under. I think this does go over. I realize that Denver's got a really good defense against a backup quarterback, so that is going to bring down my differential a little bit, but I still think it does manage to go over. But I also think Denver is going to probably be able to turn over Colt McCoy, who's a very good backup, but as a starter going against one of the best defenses in the NFL, I think he will struggle. So I see Denver covering this one with more than the 2.5 points.
Okay, you heard it here. I'm leaning toward the over, and Jeff's leaning toward Denver to cover at home. The Raiders host the Pats and are favored by 1 in a pick'em game, with the over-under set at 44.5. McDaniels knows the Pats, and Belichick knows McDaniels. The Raiders lost a game they should have won to Baker Mayfield last week. Meanwhile, the Pats won easily at Arizona on Monday night and are coming in on a day less of rest. For the loss to the Rams, the Raiders have been on a mini streak, winning 3-0, beating some good and bad teams. Meanwhile, the Pats got a nice win in Arizona, but lost 2 before that to the Vikings and the Bills. The Raiders' offense will be a test for the Pats defense, and Adams has played well against the Pats defense the past. Only 2 games, but 12 catches, I think a buck 80 and a touchdown in those 2 games. And I see the Raiders staying focused on the run, as well as getting back Walters and Renfro this week, potentially. The Pats offense has played really sporadically, mainly due to their 2 running backs being banged up, along with some of their offensive line. I would lean toward the Raiders to win this one, and I favor the under here, Jeff. What are you thinking?
This one was another really close one. I liked the way New England's been able to play physical, but they did just come off a physical game where they had a couple of players get banged up that I don't know if they'll be back. And I do like, well, the defense could put a lot of pressure on Las Vegas in the passing game, but if they can keep Judon away from Carr, then I think they'll be able to exploit New England secondary. So I think they'll probably get a couple of big plays, and I like the Raiders here in this one.
All right, heard it here. If you like prop bets, you want to check out Devontae Adams. My sense is he's going to at least go 6 and 100 with a touchdown. I would imagine both of those numbers are probably below that if you bet those prop bets. Take a look. Hey, we got 2 7-6 teams with playoff implications up next. The Chargers are 2.5 favorites at home versus the Titans, and the over/under is 46 and a hook. The Titans were manhandled last week, and are 0-3 in the last 3 games. Meanwhile, the Chargers got it done at home against the Dolphins, an important win for their playoff chances. This week's no different. My sense is who wins this game gets in as wild card at least. The Titans still have a shot at inside straight on the division title, but they're banged up, and they're banged up really badly. The Chargers are getting healthy at the right time, and the Titans have sustained some injuries that make the rest of the season very difficult. Allen and Williams went for 18 receptions, over 200 yards, and a touchdown last week between them. Meanwhile, the Titans secondary gave up 350 yards to the Jags. Let's take a closer look. On December 8th, the Titans put Farley on IR after Molden was put on the 7th. Additionally, they lost Long on the 11th and Cunningham on the 14th. The IR defense is just depleted. And the remaining players, many are questionable this week in practice, likely just to keep them out of practice because they're so thin on the defensive side of the ball. So for my third pick, take Chargers minus 2.5 against the Titans. Jeff?
Yeah, without considering injuries, I would have been torn. I would have had different indicators between covering the spread and point spread differential, but with all the injuries to Tennessee and with the Chargers finally getting healthy, I'd kind of have to throw some of my numbers out and just look at recent trends. So I definitely favor the Chargers here. It's not a free pick for me, but Chargers by probably 4 to 5 points.
Yeah, it's my free pick, and I don't like making it because I think Mike Vrabel is one of the best coaches in the league, and his players always show up. But those 3 losses, I mean, you can look right at the the cornerback that went down on the 7th and the safety on the 8th, and without those 2 guys, they would just have not been able to stop anybody. And and sometimes that happens even to the best teams. So I like if it were over a field goal, I don't think I would go make it a free pick, but it's under a field goal. I think the Chargers at least win by 3 here. All right, next up, the Bucks host the Bengals and they're home dogs at 3.5. The over-unders at 44. The Bucks lost last week badly to the 49ers and looked very bad on both sides of the ball, while the Bengals finished off the Browns fairly easily and got good production from Mixon. He's back, which is nice, and they're hitting on all cylinders as they go into the playoffs. 7 Buck defensive players are questionable ahead of the game. Meanwhile, Boyd and Higgins are questionable. I like Cincinnati to get it done, but I stay away from 3.5-point games. Jeff, any value here for you?
This one's going to be my second free pick. And as I mentioned to start with, I've got Cincinnati right up there with Philadelphia in my second tier because of the fact their offensive line has been able to finally protect Burrow a little bit. And I think he's really good and he's got good weapons to throw to. So considering I don't think Tampa Bay has much left in the tank at all, I'm taking a free pick on Cincinnati minus the 3.5.
All right, you heard it here. Jeff says 3.5 is okay. They're going to win by more than that. They probably will, as the Bucks have just looked awful all season, and the Bengals are finally getting it back together. Although, you got to keep in mind the Bucks do play on grass, and Cincinnati plays pretty fast on turf. So we'll see if that affects the game at all. Hey, Sunday night, we have the Commanders hosting the Giants for clear playoff implications in the NFC East and really wildcard bursts for the 6 and 7 spot. Commanders are favored by 4.5. The over-under set at 40. These 2 teams tied last time out, and the Commanders are coming off a bye week and now face the Giants back-to-back, which was, I got to tell you, it's an awful schedule by the NFL. It seems a bit unfair, in my opinion. I really think the league needs to look at that and not allow this again, ever again, for that matter. And then, the Giants are even in a worse situation. They got beat up by the Eagles last week after their tie. And they're 0-3-1 in the last 4. To make matters worse, McKinley is out. Several defensive players are questionable. Feels like the injuries are just mounting for the Giants here. And the Commanders win this one, but I'm skeptical about the 4.5 points. So I'm staying away. Jeff, anything here?
All of my indicators are pointing towards the Giants. Now, I know that they are banged up and they didn't play well last week, which might actually serve as a little motivation to try and get back on the right track. The coach is going to be a little fired up through the week. And I think they're going to just try, this is their last gasp, I think, to try and keep themselves in the playoff hunt. I think the Giants are going to cover the points. Not a free pick.
All right, not a free pick. So this is where we kind of have a little bit of contention. I like the Commanders and Jeff likes the Giants. So take a look yourself, but these are not free picks for either one of us. Hey, finally, Monday night, we have the Packers hosting the Rams. They're favored by 7 with the over-under at 39.5. LA won on Thursday versus the Raiders with Mayfield at the helm, while the Packers were on bye. The defending Super Bowl champs are just banged up, and they're not getting much better with many new questionable players going into a 17-degree game, feeling like 7 at game time. The Packers are relatively healthy, but have been terrible ATS at 5-8, and not much better at home, only 2-3 ATS at home. Meanwhile, the Rams have been even worse on the road at 1-2-2. Mayfield's at the helm. He's done even worse on the road ATS. The Packers have been anything but they've been anything but reliable to bet on. And but I would lean toward them here and stay away from the total. That 40 number seems about right. Jeff, any value here for you?
Boy, this seemed like an awful game to try and pick. I can't imagine myself doing it, but I'm going to have to go with Green Bay here. -7 points, as pitiful as they've looked at times. The Rams are just so beaten up, and going into Green Bay, I don't know, maybe it'll help that Baker's at least had 2 or 3 practices, but I just can't really see them being able to come into Lambeau and beat Green Bay. So I think Green Bay covers barely.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jeff. So that's your third free pick?
No, actually, the last one was my third. I had already miscounted. I already had my 3.
Oh, you already had your 3. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm with you on this one. I really think the Packers are going to cover. Just a regular pick for me. So there's not as much conviction, but really the only reason why is because they burned me so much this year that I have more conviction toward the other games I picked. So, hey, rookies, I just want to kind of confirm my free picks real quick before we sign off or have our last comments about this week. So for the first free pick, I'm doing a contrarian bet with the over in a divisional game, Browns and Ravens over 37. Again, if you can chop it down to 36.5 or 36, I would definitely wait. That number likely could see a drop. Second free pick is take Buffalo against the Fins minus a touchdown. I'd grab it now. My thought is that could go to 9 as we see the weather set in. If it drops down to 6.5, I might even go up a 2-unit bet on that one. And then finally, my third free pick is we got the Chargers and the Titans. I hate betting against Vrabel's teams because I really respect the Titans organization. They're a great organization, but sometimes injuries catch up to you, and it feels like these 2 trains are like 2 ships passing in the night. One's going to port, the other one's going into the storm, and the Titans are definitely seem to be going in the storm, where the Chargers seem to be headed back to port with getting players back. Jeff, you want to recap your free picks?
Yeah, my first one, we've got the Jets over Detroit. It's pick'em game, so just win the game. Next one, I've got Kansas City -14 against Houston. And the final one is Cincinnati -3.5 over Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I like all 6 of our picks. We haven't not gone 6-0 yet this year, I don't think. But I think this week is the week to do it. So you may want to run a round robin with those 6 picks. I think those are pretty solid. So just take a look at the weather for this week as we're going into we're getting into the cold part of the season. It's been a very mild, pretty much NFL season so far to date. I think that's going to change. We're going to get some Arctic air. It's going to affect pretty much dip all the way down in the south. Maybe gets down here in San Antonio for not this weekend, but the following weekend. So just keep an eye out on that. Continue to watch the injuries and keep in mind as we get toward the end of the season, some teams, I don't want to say they give up, but they just the guys that are injured that are long-term prospects tend to be held out because they don't want to get them, if they got through the season, they want to get them through to the next season without too much additional damage, especially if they've got anyone that's kind of banged up. So just take a look at that. That will affect the lines and that will affect the over-unders. Jeff, what are your thoughts for week 15 as we close up?
Well, you certainly got some of those teams that will start to kind of wane at the end of the season. And then you've also got to watch for those teams that you think are legit Super Bowl contenders to try and pick it up. Early December has classically been kind of a lull for some of the better teams. Last 4 or 5 Super Bowl winners have had a couple losses in that time frame, at least 2. A lot of them had 3 or 4. And then right mid-December leading into the playoffs is when they'll start picking it up and getting hot, ready for the playoffs. So within the next week or 2, you may see a few of these teams, and I think Cincinnati may be one of them that's going to get on more of a roll and start taking care of business. And I'll try and ride those teams until they prove me different.
Yeah, I kind of like the contenders and would fade the pretenders right now. So I'm fading the Fins. I think they are. I think they're a team that feasted on 500 teams. I don't know that they get in the playoffs. They might. If they do, they're probably going to be an easy out. And then like the Vikings, they seem to be a little soft. I don't know about them. They lose to Detroit and the Cowboys, and then they'll come in and win another game. So they're just up and down. I like the fact that you've set the Chiefs and the Bills as kind of the front runners. I concur with both of those. I think they're going to end up. I don't know if they'll end up in the NFC Championship game, but that will be the game to decide, I think, who represents the AFC. The NFC still up in the air. I'm hoping the Cowboys can get it done, but they did not impress last week against Houston.
Yep, I agree with those. I think there's 3 teams in the NFC with San Francisco, Philadelphia, and Dallas. I certainly think that Kansas City and Buffalo are the 2 favorites, but if Cincinnati happens to play Kansas City for whatever reason, they're just a bad matchup for Kansas City. So that could be the spoiler on that side.
Yeah, that I saw a stat that said that the 49ers defense is not allowed 60 yards rushing and like 13 games or some crazy number. I mean the stat broke the record going back to the 1930s, when they're running the old wing T, and not throwing the football at all. No play. There's no such thing as play action in the 1930s. I think they probably threw some, but not much. If you look at those old films like Sammy Baugh, he was the best quarterback at the time, and I would say he looked, he doesn't look like the quarterbacks that we see today. So they had to really rely on the run. So that just shows you how good that defense is, and they're getting people back healthy. I like the 49ers. I like them. The problem for me with the 49ers, obviously, is at the quarterback position. I like the young kid, but winning with a rookie quarterback this late in the season, it's a great story. But are you going to be able to go in and beat Mahomes? I don't know. Or Josh Allen? I don't know. Or are you going to be able to get past Jalen Hunt? I don't know. That's interesting. That's an interesting situation that we find ourselves in this season. All right, Jeff, last word for you before we sign off.
I absolutely agree. And I think it'll be fun to try and ride some of these contenders to the end of the season to see if they get on a roll and win us some games.
Yeah, I rode the Cincinnati Bengals all the way to the Super Bowl last year and lost it, unfortunately, but made some good money along the way.
Yep.
All right, rookies. That's all we got this week. Good luck. And we'll see you week 16.